Hey everyone, welcome back to another Reddit Stories video. I've been getting tons of requests for more of these, so I'm excited to bring you even more amazing tales. I'm having a blast finding some of the best stories out there to share with you all. So, grab a snack, get comfortable, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to hit 500. 0 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know we can make it happen, so let's do this together. Now, let's jump straight into our first story. This story happened back in 2004 or 2005 when I was around 13 years old. It took place in a rural area far outside the small town of Uvalde, Texas. The town itself was tiny back then and not a place you'd pass through unless you had a reason. My dad knew someone who owned a deer lease about 1,000 acres down in that area. They were having problems with wild hogs tearing up their land, so my dad decided it would be a great opportunity to take me down for a week of hunting. It would not only help his friend out, but also give us some quality father-son time. The drive from Dallas took about 7 long hours in my dad's old Jeep Wrangler. It was summer, and that Jeep wasn't exactly comfortable, but I kept myself busy staring out the window and trying to beat Super Mario Land 2 on my Game Boy. We finally got there in the early evening. The owner of the land had warned my dad that nobody had leased the property that year, so the cabin might be a bit rough. He wasn't kidding. The place was covered in dust and dirt, with signs that raccoons had been inside. We cleaned up, laid out our sleeping bags, and settled in. That first night was strange. I couldn't get comfortable, and I kept feeling like someone or something was watching us. I must have managed to drift off eventually, but it wasn't a good sleep. My dad later told me he felt the same way, but didn't say anything at the time. The next morning, we were up by 7 a.m. to scout the area. It was already getting hot, so we wanted to take advantage of the cooler morning. After about an hour of walking, we found a patch of torn-up ground, clear signs that hogs had been rooting around. We started to follow the trail into a lightly wooded area when my dad suddenly stopped and held out his arm to stop me. I looked up and saw someone standing about 50 yards away, partially obscured by the trees. The figure was completely still. This was private land, and the gate had been locked when we arrived. My dad called out, "Hey, we're hunters, and this is private property." The figure didn't move. We slowly got closer, and I noticed the person was wearing a bright red ski jacket and pants. In the middle of a Texas summer with temperatures already approaching 100 degrees. My dad called out again, louder this time, but still no response. He told me to stay back and unsnapped the clip on his pistol holster. All we had with us were sidearms, as the rifles were still back at the cabin. He walked around the figure's front, continuing to speak calmly, asking if the person was okay. When he reached the front, he stopped and stared for a moment. It's a mannequin," he called back, sounding completely baffled. I moved closer, and sure enough, it was a mannequin, perfectly dressed in a bright red ski outfit. The clothes looked brand new, no dirt, no stains, no signs that they had been outside for any length of time. As I stood there, I felt that same eerie sensation that we were being watched. My dad's face showed the same realization, and he whispered, "We're leaving, now." He grabbed my hand, drew his pistol, and led the way back, constantly scanning our surroundings. The walk back to the cabin felt like it took forever, though it was probably only 45 minutes. When we got back, we packed up immediately and left without a word. As we drove away, my dad called his friend who owned the land, telling him what had happened. His friend was just as confused as we were and said he'd check it out the following week when he was in the area. A week later, my dad's friend called to tell us that he'd walked the entire property and found nothing. No mannequin, no signs of trespassers, nothing at all. He was certain nobody had been there. To this day, I have no idea what we encountered, but it's one of the creepiest moments I've ever had. The feeling of being watched, the inexplicable appearance of the mannequin in the middle of the woods. It's an experience I'll never forget. Whoever or whatever was out there, I'm just glad we never got any closer.